Okay, here we are back with the Texas part of the chapter. We didn't finish this. One thing I did want to go back to, I talked about this, I didn't talk about this, but this came up, and when we talk about the Long Bill under Van Buren, that was when the panic was going on, 1837, and people, what they were doing was buying things on credit because and that was really not very commonplace during this time period, so that tells you how bad the economy was, that they were actually doing that, and then when push comes to shove and they have to go and settle up, people really don't have the money because the economy is pretty bad, and they just have this long list of things that they've purchased on credit, which was, again, sort of something shameful at the time. That was really not commonplace. So I just wanted to get back. I know you were up all night wondering what that was, but I did say I'd come back to that one because I wanted to finish the other information. So that's that, and let's go back to Texas. So what the problem was with Texas was the United States, again, running out of space, we want to spread out a little bit. And to what we know as Texas today, that land was actually part of Mexico, and Mexico had just won their independence from Spain in 1821. So they were fighting with Spain, trying to get that all figured out. Now that they have their independence, they have a guy who is running Mexico, Santa Anna, who kind of runs things a little bit like a dictator, and he says to the Americans, fine, the people, the Mexican government says, fine, you can have this big, huge tract of land, and then if you want to divvy it up and sell it to Americans and have them come here, great. So they give it to Stephen Austin, and he takes this big tract of land and then divides it up and gives it out, and it ends up that these 300 families come into Texas, which in that time was part of Mexico. So he says, fine, you can do it, the Mexican government says, but here are the stipulations. You cannot bring any slaves. Mexico had outlawed slavery previously. You can't bring slaves in. We don't believe in slavery. You can't do slavery. People have to accept the Mexican culture and absorb it, assimilate themselves into the Mexican culture, and also they have to be Roman Catholic. Our religion is very important to us. So these are the things that you have to do. Slavery is not listed on here, but that is one of the things for sure. So make sure you know that. They said that they didn't want slavery. So guess what? When people come to Texas, they are coming from places in the South. And it's some historians think that, were they doing this because they wanted to have another slave state? That really wasn't what people were thinking at this time. Texas isn't going to get annexed, I don't believe, until 1845. So we're still a ways off from annexation and statehood. I really don't think, and historians don't really think that that's what they were trying to do. What they really were trying to do is get more land. Remember, again, the exhausting of the soil because of tobacco. And what ends up happening is the climate in Texas is very similar to that of the South, and they're going to grow the same kinds of crops that are labor intensive. So it warrants this slave labor. So they're coming from states that have slaves. So of course they're going to bring their slaves with them, and slavery is going to be part of the culture in Texas too. And the Mexicans don't like it, and it's a big bone of contention. And the fact that a lot of them are Protestant and they continue practicing Protestantism. They do not convert to Catholicism the way they say they will, and that annoys the Mexicans as well. So those problems are there. And what annoys the Americans that come over into Mexico, the Texas, Mexico, is that there are Mexican military men everywhere, and a lot of the Mexican military men were actually former criminals and things like that. So you have these people trying to control them, and the type of person that would go to Texas would be sort of a tough person looking to try and take a risk and make it somewhere else. So they weren't really the kind of people that could be pushed around very easily. So there's a lot of friction. There's a lot of friction. You have people like Davy Crockett and Jim Bowie, who are frontiersmen. Jim Bowie develops this knife, the Bowie knife. He's like very much an outdoorsman, a hunter, fierce kind of guy. And these are the kind of people, these kind of personalities that are going to Texas. So they're not going to be pushed around. Sam Houston, who the city of Houston, Texas is named after him. He was the governor of Tennessee. He's going to go there too and lead a revolt as well. We're going to talk about that. So there's a lot of friction. And again, this is cut off here, but what it says, they're pioneers. They're people who cannot be pushed around. They're people who are tough. They're looking to take a risk. They're going there not knowing what to find. So you're not going to easily push those folks around. Okay, so lots of friction. So again, the slavery issue is huge. Immigration, people just coming in without, originally they said that these original families can come, we're giving them this land. Then all of a sudden, all these other people were coming. Wasn't really part of the deal. Definitely slavery is an issue. As I said, Mexico had abolished slavery in 1830, so they did not want to take steps backwards that way. And the Texans just flat out ignored all this stuff. So what Santa Anna is going to do is he's going to take away the rights of the American Texans, the people living in Texas, comma, Mexico, before it became Texas, part of the United States, the Mexican part of Texas. I mean, yeah, the Texas is in Mexico. Very confusing. So he's going to take away their basic rights. So that's not going to sit well with those people. And he's going to take Houston and put him into jail for about 8 months. And that doesn't go over well either. People are absolutely outraged, and it all is going to erupt into a couple of battles that we're going to talk about. So it's a major problem. That's Houston. I know you're wondering where he got that tie. It's really something. Okay, so Texas is going to declare independence. They name Houston their commander in chief. And Santa Anna is not going to take this lightly. So they are going to the Mexicans are going to trap about 200 Americans, Texan Americans, in the Alamo. The Alamo was at one point a missionary, so people used it for that, and then it had been used as like an arsenal. It was sort of a fort, but originally it had been like I believe, a Catholic missionary, and it was just this building, right? This building where people were, and they were surrounded, and 200 people got killed, Texas Americans. So what ends up happening is, they want to sort of avenge that. They're very upset by it. The battle cry was "Remember the Alamo." We'll never forget what happened at the Alamo. And those that they captured, so 400, a bunch of Texans then in retaliation, they are going there talking about getting together and meeting the Mexicans at this other location, Goliad. And when they get there, they are captured and all executed, because the Mexicans said that they were pirates, and they actually executed them pretty horrifically. So here you have about now 600 Texan slash American immigrants who have been killed. So this is not going to sit well at all with Americans, Texans of American descent, right? So Texas is going to remember the Alamo. And this is actually a mosaic that was done years later, and more in modern times, where they're saying what had happened was the Texans had a cannon that really belonged to the Mexicans. The Mexicans had given it to them years before to help them defend themselves against the Native Americans. And so the Mexicans kept saying, "We're coming back to get that cannon. We're coming back to get that cannon." And the Texans had it, and the Texans were like, "Well, come and get it. What are you going to do? Well, we're going to light it and, blow you away. Come and get it." So it became like this taunting thing. They put a flag on it that looks like the one that's in this mosaic that literally said, "Come and get it." So it was like a taunting thing to the Mexicans done by the Texas Americans. Okay, this is just the battles. Okay. So it became a major problem. And of course, or not David Bowie, he's a singer, Davy Crockett and Bowie both got slaughtered, which makes them sort of martyrs and legendary, of course. And as I said, remember the Alamo, remember Goliad, and everybody hated Santa Anna and hoped that he died. They found him in the end, hiding in a field during the last battle in San Jacinto. They forced him to sign an agreement, and he does. And he says that he will recognize the border of Mexico down at the Rio Grande, or the lowest border of Texas, at the Rio Grande River, and he will, treat people better, free them, do all this stuff. And then he says, "Oh, that treaty doesn't hold up. I signed that under duress. I was upset. I thought everybody was going to kill me," and people just couldn't really even take him seriously. So see, here's the Rio Grande river here, and that's what they said that they would, where this right here, the boundary claimed by Texas, that's what they made Santa Ana sign, this boundary. And you see the different battles here. So the orangey ones are, or the ones outlined in red are Mexican, and the other, these are Texan. Okay, so what he assigned to, what was this agreement that he signed? He would withdraw all the Mexican troops out of Texas, recognize the Rio Grande as a southwestern border. And again, this is what he said. Oh, I shouldn't have signed that. I would thought you guys were going to kill me. So of course I signed it, so it doesn't count. Well, they were like, whatever. So, okay. Um, Okay, so Jackson is going to recognize the Lone Star Republic. It's just a republic. Again, it doesn't get, Texas doesn't get statehood for a little while, and it's going to be an issue again because of the slavery thing. Right now, the states are balanced because the Missouri Compromise, everything is balanced. So we don't really want to, what are we going to do if we had Texas? If you were to look at the climate and the culture and the geography and the fact that there had already been slaves brought in, people in the South would definitely push to make it a slave state, but they're gonna hold off on this for a couple of years. We're actually gonna talk about it later when it gets annexed as a state, but for right now, it's a republic, Lone Star Republic, and in fact, Texas has a pretty rich history with that, and are pretty proud of how they came about. And it is an interesting story and a pretty tough fight that they had to go through to get free there from the Mexicans. Okay, so they do push for annexation as early as 1837, but it's going to take a while. And this is what I just said on the last slide about the slavery thing. Most of these people, as we said, came from the South and the Southwest. Just geographically, you're not going to have somebody go from, New England down to settle in Texas. I mean, you might, but it's very, very odd. If people are looking for more land because their soil is exhausted or whatever, they're going to just go straight across and come in from the southern states. Okay, it was an issue of, as it says here, proximity, not a conspiracy over slave states. A lot of historians have gone back and studied this, and they say no, it wasn't done by the Southerners to try and create another slave state. I don't think they were thinking that far ahead and doing it that way. But once it was done, once Texas was free and it was a state, or was it, yeah, when it does become a state, it is a question of how do we do this because of the slavery thing. Okay, so and again, because of the climate and the things that you grow there, it does warrant tremendous labor to grow those kinds of crops, and there were already slaves there, so it's definitely a concern. Okay, so Van Buren is going to run again in this election of 1840. And this whole thing with log cabins and hard cider, those are things that the common people, and Van Buren, they were trying to run William Henry Harrison actually as the common man candidate, and they were trying to say that Van Buren was wealthy and hoity-toity, but really it was the other way around. Van Buren came from very modest, background, and William Henry Harrison was more of someone who was from more of the wealthier status. And what they were trying to do was appeal to people with William Henry Harrison by saying log cabins and hard cider, and making fun of Van Buren, saying that he was, champagne and caviar kind of person. And that was what they were trying to do. The Whigs, this we talked about how in the last election people were starting to actually have like a platform, and a party would put forth a particular candidate that they wanted to run. They would look to see who would be the person who would get the most votes for them. So the uh, the whole idea, their answer was the hard cider and log cabin situation. That was what they came up with. Okay. Okay. So again, Harrison was not born in a log cabin at all. He was one of the people from one of the what they call the first families of Virginia, a more wealthier family. He is actually going to win. And again, remember, this is Tippecanoe and Tyler too. Tyler is his vice president. Again, he's also a war hero. He's got that going for him too. But it was a pretty close margin. However, the electoral was pretty significant. and they wanted to fix the economy. The economy was a big issue in this election during this time period because